on writing what has already been written, AKA Monkeys and Typewriters. An infinite number of monkeys, writing at an infinite number of typewriters, will eventually write the greatest novel ever known to man. This is a fact. What also is true is, in this scenario, that group of primates will write every book that will ever be written by man, and also every book that will never be written by man, of which the latter is a much larger number. This infinite group of primates would write The Great Gatsby. In fact, they would also write The Great Gatsby, word for word. However, instead of naming the protagonist J. Gatsby, he would go by the name of Turd Ferguson. The rest of the entire book would be an exact duplicate of The Great Gatsby, but Gatsby would exist as Turd Ferguson. And this book would be written an infinite number of times as well. And, I guess thinking even more, there would have to exist an infinitely long version of The Great Gatsby that details The Great Gatsby exactly, over and over, an infinite amount of times. Right? I don't know at this point. Thinking this way is probably a highly abstract and complicated delve into set theory of multiple orders of infinities, which may be a thing, or it may be something I just made up, which, if I'm being honest, is more like an exceptionally poor paraphrasing of the math that explains the abstract concept of infinity. Infinity is a fun concept. Fun is also subjective. Therefore, I will elaborate on the claim I made in my previous statement and what I consider fun about exploring a never-ending series of numbers. Fun is somewhat more of a cursory and somewhat superficial understanding of the concept of infinity that is highlighted primarily through thought experiments and examples that all have an end goal to help shine a speck of light on the depth and complexity of the concept of infinity. Anything deeper than that, which would necessitate a strong foundation in math, starts to become a lot less fun in my mind, although a lot more impressive. However, that trade-off of fun versus impressive meets at an intersection for me at the level I described earlier, and is the realm at which I dive into this abstract concept. So, just as a forewarning for any math PhDs out there looking to take me to task, my focus will be heavily weighted towards the fun part of infinity and very lightly weighted towards the impressive part. So let me start again. An infinite number of monkeys, writing at an infinite number of typewriters, will eventually write the greatest novel ever known to man. After reading that famous quote, a reasonable follow-up question may result. What is the exact number of monkeys that it would take to make sure that this novel is written? Now, this is a bit of a trick question. This is because, in order to figure that out, we would need to know how many characters long the greatest novel of all time would be. The main thesis of the question implies that it will be the greatest novel ever written. So, we must take into account every novel that has been written up until today, and every novel that will be written until the eventual heat death of the universe. Then, there is also the problem with subjectivity. No novel could ever be written that would be collectively agreed upon by humanity that it was indeed the greatest novel ever written. The only way that we would know the greatest novel of all time was written would be if both Kanye West and Tom York of Radiohead decided to collaborate to compose a magnum opus together. If such a scenario were to occur, mankind would be left with no option except to concede that the greatest novel that will ever exist had just been born. Yet, due to the fact that West and York have not joined forces, it leaves us with an unsolvable question. I propose a workaround by way of tweaking the question just a little to give a solvable solution so that I can provide a small bit of insight regarding the magnitude of the concept of infinity. My workaround goes something like this. Imagine that I have a magical infinity stone, and that I can use this stone to instantly turn every single atom in the observable universe into a monkey with a typewriter. I do so, and subsequently command them to get to work. A new question emerges from my setup. How much of the greatest novel of all time will be written by one of these monkeys as measured by total characters scribed? Fun fact. This is also a thought-provoking interview question for anyone who wishes to apply for the job of Sorcerer Supreme. I am in between jobs right now, so thinking about this will be helpful, and perhaps I will submit my resume in hopes of winning the coveted position of defending reality as we know it. Now, for this thought experiment to work properly, I must receive something known as a callback, obviously from the organization looking to hire for Sorcerer Supreme, during which time they will let me know that they are impressed with my resume and would like to advance me along in the interviewing process, and as such, request that I come in for an in-person discussion. I book my flight, grab a taxi, yada yada yada. Let me fast forward to the in-person interview. I'll skip the introductory niceties and the get-to-know-you parts that come with this Sorcerer Supreme hiring process and jump right into the interview question at hand and how it would play out between me and the interviewer dressed in glorious, flowing robes sitting across the table from me. I would tell him that the first step would be to figure out how many atoms are in the observable universe. A quick Google search informs the two of us that this is some number in the range of 10 to the 78 and 10 to the 82. I am assuming both the interviewer and I would want to read as much as possible of this Kanye and Radiohead collaboration. Therefore, for the purpose of this thought-arousing interview question, I let him know that I will use the high end of that range. The next step is to think of the total different possibilities that can take the place of one character of text. I tell the interviewer that we know Kanye and York's novel would be written in English, so there has to be a minimum of 26 characters. I continue and say that we won't care about capitalization, and also inform the theoretical wizard that I think best while voicing my inner stream of consciousness, which I cunningly phrase as reasoning and logicking out loud, all with the purpose of allowing him to hear and assess my thought process. I then let the wizard know that I'll round all the total character combination possibilities to a nice round even 30, thereby implying that this novel will utilize only 4 different and unique punctuation notes, such as periods and commas. 30 sounds like a nice number to work with for the rest of this interview question. At this point in the interview, the wizard will undoubtedly look at me with raised eyebrows and say, "You know there are a lot more than that, right?" I'll respond in the affirmative, and also let him know that I understand the purpose of the query he posited to me is not to gauge my keyboard and grammar knowledge. In my head, I would be pleased with how I have broken down and set up the problem thus far. I'd think, well, now I've turned it into a simple SAT question. 30 to the x is equal to 10 to the 82, and solve for x, which involves the simple employment of some high school math and a cursory understanding of log functions. Wait. It would appear that I have run into a problem that parallels a challenge that I face every time I begin to apply ink to paper, and, worst of all, a problem that never reveals itself until I have dug in my heels and am deeply engaged in my process, at which point I am frustrated to realize that what I was trying to explain is actually much more complicated than I had initially envisioned in my head. What I had anticipated would conclude as a tight and punchy 500-word essay has morphed into a much larger, more complicated, and barely lucid product as compared to the imagined version I had completed inside my head. It evolves into a self-reflection exercise more than anything else, which is another very important job skill for Sorcerer Supreme. I have to stop for a second. I hadn't given this problem the due diligence and respect that it deserves. For instance, my simple solution does not address the possibility of a bunch of the monkeys all hitting A on the typewriter as their initial entry to create the world's greatest novel. Hold on. Could an infinite number of these typewriting monkeys all hit A? Are there an infinite amount of books in this first set that all start with the letter A? But then, does that mean there can't be a novel that starts with B? That can't be true. There has to be, I think. My brain starts to melt. I have to think some more. Can there both be an infinite amount of books that all start with the letter A, and then an infinite amount of books that all start with the letter B? Well, if that's true, then there's also the same for C and D, and so on. My math skills are poor, but I believe we are talking about orders of infinity now, which I don't understand at all, despite the fact that I'm positive that at some point I have had it explained to me in person by someone much smarter than me. Plus, I have also probably watched some YouTube videos or read some essays regarding this exact aspect of infinity. But now I'm not sure if that is even exactly what I'm thinking about right now. However, my current thinking process has provided me with some insight into a large problem that I had yet to consider regarding this shrewd interview question. I didn't account for redundancy, which, of course, would occur. I'm not 100% sure, but I think we are dealing with probabilities and statistics when we are talking about this now. In theory, there would be a non-zero chance that if I told all the monkeys to start typing, theoretically, every single one of them could smash the A key to start. The odds are exceptionally small, something like 1 over 30 to the power of 10 to the 82, but it could still happen. I have my light bulb inducing aha moment of clarity. I had solely thought of unique books that would be written by the monkeys. I had incorrectly believed that they would actually all create something different, which, now that I have said it and thought a bit more about it, is a borderline statistical impossibility. It may, in fact, statistically end up being just as probable as all of them pounding the A key over and over and over. Actually, I have to think a bit more on that. No, that's not exactly true. No, it's not true at all. After the first monkey enters his first keystroke, the probability of typing a new character versus typing the one that has already been typed would have to be calculated. I think. It's definitely something like that, at least. At any rate, it's still an exceptionally low chance of occurring. It's also not the point of this essay. Jumping down this mathematical rabbit hole would start to lean this essay's purpose towards detailing the more impressive aspects of math and not as much the fun aspects, which I prefaced at the beginning was my goal. Well, at this point I've realized that mathematically I am in unbelievably over my head. But this is not an interview for an advanced statistician position or risk manager at a hedge fund. It is an interview for the title of Sorcerer Supreme. I have a workaround. And the ability to find workarounds are double underlined in skills required as a job requirement for Sorcerer Supreme. My tweaking of the original question has bestowed onto me a reality warping infinity stone. A person doesn't give themselves a stone like this and then neglects to use its powers in a made-up scenario. That would be sheer madness. And, to prove that I am not indeed mad with insanity, I must utilize this stone's powers to compensate for my limited math skills and allow me to successfully answer this question. This is called lateral thinking. And this is what heroes do. Laterally thinking, I will attempt to resolve the problem by commanding my stone to manifest a ludicrously detail-oriented editor, whose powers border on omnipotence, to lead this large group of primates and typewriters. This editor will make sure that there exists no duplications within the text provided by monkeys once they have arrived at their final product. He would work in the following way. Assume a one-character article was required. There are 30 possible combinations. He would make sure that 30 monkeys had written every single possible combination and that there would be no duplication. If it was a two-character text, he would make sure that 30 times 30 equals 900 monkeys had all made 900 unique texts without duplication. At this point, the question has evolved and reads more like, what is the total length in characters that will be written by a group of monkeys, all of whom possess their own typewriter, whose number equals the total atoms in the observable universe, assuming that a godlike editor supervises and necessitates it such that every novel that is written by the monkeys is unique. That's what I'm going with. Now, after taking advantage of my Infinity Stone's powers, so that the math competency required to solve this problem has been reduced to high school level, I, happily, have arrived at an answer which I proudly present to my interviewer. A possible finished work produced by our imaginary primate team is the following sentence. This exact sentence right here is a universe of monkeys. That bolded sentence, which I scrawled on a small sheet of paper and handed to my wizard-like interviewer, is simultaneously underwhelming and overwhelming. The length of that sentence is underwhelming, which then consequently overwhelms my mind with how insane the concept of infinity is. A mere 56 characters is all that the 10 to the 82 monkeys will produce of the opening sentence to Kanye and Radiohead's novel. Also, that assumes the existence of that ever-present, uber-attentive, Infinity Stone manifested head editor. The interviewer, at this point, would accept the paper that I handed to him, look down and read it carefully, then look up at me with arms crossed and ask me what it would take to complete that sentence with proper punctuation and add a period. I'd think for a second and realize where he was leading me with this type of question. He was leading me into the multiverse. I would let him know that our universe would be incapable of handling that proper punctuation. In order to do so, we would require a multiverse consisting of 30 more of our own universes that had all been affected by the powers of my magic stone. He would agree, but then also point out the crucial flaw in my statement that would most likely derail my chances of becoming Sorcerer Supreme. He would say, "Well done. However, now that we are dealing with the multiverse, do you think your magic stone would even have the power to control universes outside the one that we currently reside?" "Touché, wizard." "I'm not sure, but I'm guessing if I knew the answer to that, I would be Sorcerer Supreme." The interviewer smiles, gives me a wink, and thanks me for taking the time to interview, and lets me know that he'll be in touch. I smile back and thank him for his time and look forward to hearing back from him. As I gather myself and stand to leave, the interviewer would leave me with one parting shot. "Did you read another one of the sentences that was produced by your editor-driven team of monkeys?" I would reply, "Well, really, every sentence that could be produced would be produced by them. No?" He would nod his head, and then hand me a thin sheet of fortune cookie-like paper with a sentence scrawled across it, and let me know that this one seemed to stand out from the rest. "Do you think what you wrote today was original at all?" The problem is, I almost kinda did. It wasn't until halfway through writing this essay that I decided to play on Google a bit, and in doing so, I realized that this was a topic that had been explored quite a bit. Not only that, it has been explored and written about by people who were much better than me at math, and philosophy, and writing, and, well, everything. I'll be honest, that almost made me stop writing halfway through this, but then I realized one strength that I do have, although perhaps only I consider it a strength. The one thing that I'm not afraid to do is put my ideas out into the world. I have to give myself a pat on the back for that at least. It also taught me that, as clever as I thought I was in my head thinking about monkeys and typewriters and dealing with concepts of infinity, and how clear it all was to me mentally, my finished product was a poor attempt at elucidating what I considered impressive in my head. This exercise, whereby I attempted to share this process with everyone else, has humbled me both in my ability to communicate my ideas as well as my ability to think of difficult abstract concepts. In closing, one thing I feel it behooves me to point out is the fact that I doubt no one else has neither realized nor written about the fact that the combination of the genius of Kanye West, coupled with the voracious loyalty of Tom York's cult following, would produce the perfect formula for a novel that would be universally accepted as the greatest of all time.